Hello! Have you ever wanted to install Neovim on NixOS and you found a lot of information about different systems and frameworks, so you weren't able to decide what to do? So in this video I'm going to install Nixvim, NixCats-nvim that use almost the same Neovim configuration, and then I will compare them. Just a disclaimer, I installed all of these for the first time, except Nixvim, where I already made a video about. So what is Nixvim? Nixvim is a Neovim distribution built around Nix modules. It's designed so you can configure Neovim and most plugins directly through Nix options, and Nixvim will generate the corresponding Lua config for you and install plugins via Nix. This means you don't start with a bunch of handwritten Lua plugins and lists. You tell Nix what you want, themes, LSP, plugins, etc. and Nixvim produces a Neovim setup that matches. It works nicely with NixOS, Home Manager or standalone flakes. Now let's do a walkthrough. First, we add Nixvim to our flakes input, so it's available as a module. Then in our outputs we import that module so Home Manager or NixOS can enable it. Then inside a module block, for example nixvim.nix, we enable programs.nixvim and configure things like general editor settings, key maps, plugins, themes, and so on. So here we can turn on options like tab settings, line numbers, search behavior, and plugins. I enabled LSP, Git signs, telescope, LazyGit, and my theme Tokyo-Night. Not my theme, but the theme that I like. All this is enabled in the options in Nix, and Nixvim generates the Lua file for us. We can expand this block to configure other options like the LSP servers, key maps, or extra plugins, all through Nix attributes. The docs even list real-world examples to help you get started. What makes Nixvim special is that it gives you a fully Nix-managed Neovim setup, with sensible defaults and minimal need to write your own Lua plugin code. You tell Nix what you want, editor settings, themes and plugins, and Nixvim generates the necessary Lua and installs everything reproducibly. This makes it ideal if you want your Neovim configuration to live entirely in Nix alongside your system and environment configs, and you don't want to maintain a separate handwritten Lua plugin list. Basically, you Nixify your Lua code. Now that we've seen how Nixvim works, let's configure NixCats. NixCats is a Nix-based Neovim package manager that mixes the best of both worlds. We have Nix that handles downloading and installing the dependencies, and we keep our Lua config like normal. This means that we don't have to translate our plugins and configurations into Nix. You can write your plugins and keymats in Lua and just let Nix bring in the binaries and plugin sources. You start by importing NixCats into your Nix flakes just like before, and then you point NixCats at your Neovim config directory. NixCats will use Nix to fetch everything in your list, LSP binaries, CLI tools, tree-sitter support, and so on. Then this template also supports multiple Neovim executables with variants of your config through its category system, so you can have a lightweight and a heavy variant side by side. So for example, we put our normal init.lua and plugin lists in place. Then we add the dependencies to NixCats config in Nix. We run nixbuild to have NixCats produce a self-contained NVim binary with all dependencies. And optionally, we can use tools like regular cats to quickly test plugin changes locally without rebuilding everything. This makes NixCats serve as a bridge. Nix takes care of plugins, tools, and downloads and reproducibility, and your Lua config remains exactly how it would be on other systems. What makes this special is that you don't give up your normal Lua config style. Nix only handles fetching things from the store, and you keep using lazy.nvim or whatever plugin manager you like with Neovim. Okay, after that, let's install NVF, short for Nixvim framework. NVF takes a slightly different philosophy. You configure everything in Nix with optional Lua support. It's built to be modular, reproducible, portable, and even configurable. The entire editor config, themes and plugins, LSP, lazy loading, and options piece together in one unified Nix configuration. To start with NVF, short for Nixvim framework, you add it to reflect the Nix inputs and then define your editor entirely in Nix. NVF's core idea is that almost every aspect of your Neovim setup, themes, plugins, LSP, status lines, lazy loading, and more, is declared in Nix and not in Lua. You don't have to drop Lua entirely, and NVF supports optional Lua for things you want to have fine-grained control over. But the primary configuration language is Nix. That means your entire editor config lives in one consistent declarative format. The big selling points for NVF are: we have a Nix-first configuration. It uses Nix for everything by default, with optional Lua only where you want it. Also, modularity and customizable. You can enable just the pieces that you want. 3-seater, LSP themes, laser loading and so on, and nothing is forced on you. It's reproducible and portable because your entire setup is a Nix derivation. The same config behaves the same way everywhere Nix is available. We have also lazy loading built in. Both built-in and external plugins can be lazy loaded for faster startup. You also have the possibility for flexible plugin sources. You can pull plugins or modules from anywhere Nix can fetch. Nix packages, Flake inputs, custom sources, or add your own module easily. You can use NVF as standalone using Nix Run Editor, or integrate it into NixOS or Home Manager, depending on how you like to structure your system. So the conclusion, how did I compare and what to choose? So now that we've seen all three, Nixvim, NixCats and NVF, let's take a moment to wrap up and talk about how they're similar and how they're different and what you might choose depending on what you want. At the core, all of them do the same basic thing. They give you a reproducible declarative Neovim setup using Nix instead of manually installing plugins and writing an init Lua on every machine. They make your editor portable, shareable, and defined in code that's checked into your Flake, and that's a huge win over traditional Neovim configurations. But beyond that common goal, each project has its own philosophy and workflow. NixCats is the most Lua-friendly of the three. With NixCats, Nix is mostly a package manager. It fetches plugin sources, binaries, LSP runtimes and so on. But you keep your normal Lua config just like you would in the standard .config/nvim. You still use lazy.nvim or whatever plugin manager you prefer, and you don't have to translate your existing Lua into Nix. The pros are, it's easiest to adopt if you already have a Lua config. It keeps existing Neovim workflows intact, minimal rewrites. It's great if you want just Nix to manage your downloads and leave the config in Lua. The cons are, because the actual logic lives in Lua, it's not fully declarative in Nix, and when you're using Nix, you want the things to be declarative. You still need to think about plugin manager behavior and Lua structures. I think NixCats is best for people who are coming from a traditional Neovim Lua config, who want Nix to help with their dependencies management but nothing else. Nixvim sits in the middle. It's a Neovim distribution built around Nix modules, and its goal is to let you configure most of the things directly in Nix. Editor options, plugins, themes, schemats, without needing a huge Lua file. It provides sane defaults and module options for a lot of common things. The pros are, it has a strong Nix integration with clear module options. It has good defaults and can be more intuitive if you come from NixOS or Home Manager, and it works well with Flakes, NixOS or Home Manager. The cons are, you have to translate complex Lua snippets into Nix strings that can be annoying. Also, lazy loading support has historically been less mature than with NVF, but it's catching up. Nixvim should be best for people who want to stay mostly in Nix and enjoy declarative modules without fully abandoning Lua when needed. NVF or Nixvim framework takes the fully declarative idea further. Your entire Neovim setup, plugins, LSPs, 3-seater themes, lazy loading options is defined in Nix. It's extremely modular and flexible, with minimal defaults and the ability to bring in Lua only and where you want it. The pros are, it's very modular. You enable only what you want. It has built-in lazy loading and reproducibility. It works as a standalone or integrated with NixOS and Home Manager. It's designed to behave the same anywhere Nix runs. The cons are, it requires more comfort with Nix, especially compared to Lua-first workflows. Also, if you're coming from a pure Lua config, it can feel like a steeper learning curve. I think it's best for people who want everything declarative in Nix, with full reproducibility and modular control. If you figure ease of use on a spectrum from easiest to hardest for most people, I think NixCats is easiest, because you can largely reuse your existing Lua config and just let Nix manage the dependencies. In the middle we have Nixvim, because it gives you sensible defaults and mostly Nix-centric configs, but can get awkward on a detailed Lua conversion. Then the most flexible and potentially also hardest is NVF, because it expects you to define your config in Nix itself, which pays off in reproducibility and modularity, but requires a stronger Nix fluency. So which should you use? If you want to keep your Lua workflow, use NixCats. If you want something that's mostly Nix driven, but also minimal in Lua, try Nixvim. If you want the maximum configurability, use NVF. At the end of the day, they all help you configure Neovim with Nix, instead of just writing an init to Lua by hand. The choice really comes down to how you want to lean into Nix versus how much you want to keep Lua in the driver's seat. Each has its place, and none are objectively bad. It's about what fits your workflow and comfort level with Nix and Neovim. Thank you so much for listening. We're at the end of the video. It was really fun configuring them, but I also ran into a lot of errors, so setting them up for the first time is always really error prone. Just be aware of that. If you have anything to add, or if I messed something up or forgot something, please leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to support me, and I hope to see you soon again. Goodbye.